alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I will be talking about a great prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was the son of Prophet Dawood alayhi salam. After the death of Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, Sulaiman alayhi salam became the king. He begged Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for kingdoms such as none would have had. One of the great qualities of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was wisdom. To use
Sisters and brothers, please be patient and listen to what Sulaiman has to say about Sulaiman alayhi salam. Inshallah, it will be an inspiration for us and our youth, inshallah. So yeah, Sulaiman, go ahead.
Alright. One of the great qualities of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was wisdom, which he used to grow the kingdom. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam with many miracles. He could control the wind whenever he wanted. He could understand the language of birds and animals and even talk to them. And he controlled the jinns. At his command, they built huge temples, fortresses, towers, and palaces. Once Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam and his army were passing through a valley while going to Escalon. An ant saw the army marching towards them. The ant cried out to the other ants, "Run to your homes, or else Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam and his army will crush you." The Prophet was amused to hear this. He ordered his army to take another path. He then thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for saving the ants and gave him this ability to understand their language. The Prophets had jinns and birds serving in his army as well. They were all kept in orders and ranks, and the Prophet commanded strict discipline among them. That is why he was very upset one day to find one of the birds, the hoopoe, was absent one day.
Slow and loud.
Without his consent. The bird soon appeared to explain his absence, that he came from Sabah. He saw Sabah's queen named Bilqis, who has plenty of everything, even a splendid throne. But in spite of all this wealth, they were worshipping the sun instead of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet sent the hoopoe with a letter to invite the queen and her people to accept Islam. Bilqis opened the letter and she read, the Prophet said, after praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the true God. The queen sent her messengers to Sulaiman alayhi salam's palace. They realized that Sabah was nothing to the Prophet's kingdom. They were surprised to see lions, tigers, and birds serving in the army. When the Sabah messenger offered the gifts to the Prophet, they were shocked to see the Prophet's reaction. He said, "Thanks to Allah, He has given me enough wealth and a large kingdom. He has even made me a prophet." He told them to go back and tell the queen the message. He told the queen to turn to Allah or suffer consequences. Upon hearing all this, she decided to visit the Prophet's palace. Upon her arrival, the Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam took her to the grand hall, where the floor was made of glass and water flowed underneath it. She thought it was water, but the Prophet told her it was just glass, which impressed her greatly. The Prophet then gave da'wah to her to accept the deen of Allah. She accepted it and told her people to worship Allah instead of the sun. A few years later, when the Prophet was old and sitting in a chair overseeing the jinns working on an architecture, the Prophet died while sitting in that position. The jinns were working hard for days, thinking that the Prophet was watching over them. The termites started to nibble his staff, which he was leaning on. They kept nibbling the staff until the staff fell down. The body of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam fell down too, and that is when everyone knew of his passing. Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam was buried in Jerusalem. He was a brave, wise, and a strong king and a prophet, but after all that power and wealth, he was still humble to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for everything he had. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وأشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم.
Allahu Akbar. Takbir. Barakallah feek. Suleiman, that was really good, man. So yeah, just like Suleiman, if there is one from sisters. So, okay, okay. So they do have mic. Okay. So they have a mic in the sisters end. They do have. So
For the sister side.
okay, go ahead. So we will have a short recitation from one of the sisters, uh, younger sisters, I would presume. So yeah, inshallah. After that, we'll have Brother Shaheed continue with his class, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Arham. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم مالك قل هو الله واحد الله الصمد ولم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.
I think Brother Shaheed is going to start his class, inshallah. So yeah, if you have any notes or books to write the notes, I would suggest you do it now and be ready. Assalamu alaikum.
They want the recitation.
About to start lecture?
Yes, I can.
Okay, next time, next week, okay?
From the sisters, can we get the mic? Oh, yeah, it's here.
That's right, right? All right. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd. All right, so this time we're going to forego the presentation. So that just means you have to pay more attention, inshallah. All right, so last time we talked about ways to obtain patience. And so tonight we're going to look at some of the categories of patience. And it should be, inshallah, pretty short tonight. So the Imam Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that patience can also be divided into categories, following the 5 categories of deeds. Anyone know the 5 categories of deeds? You know what? Halal, haram. Well, there's 4 stages of halal and 1 haram. All right, so that should make it a little easier. Mubah is 1. Makruh is 1. Mustahab. Huh? Makruh? He said makruh. Anyone else? Huh? No? This is the one where that we have to do. Yes. Fard or wajib, right? And so there are 5 categories of deeds. So everything that we say and everything that we do, it falls into these 5 categories. So generally they are what is wajib or fard, what is mustahab, then mubah, then makruh, and then haram. And basically these are the things, so the one thing is that these are things that we must do, right? If it's something that is wajib, we must do it. And mustahab is something that we should do. We don't have to do it, but it's something that is preferred that we do it, and we should do it. Mubah is something that we can do. It is allowed. It is something that is permissible. It's allowed. Makruh is something that we should not do. It is within the realms of permissible. It's not haram, but it is something that we should not do. It's disliked that we do it. And then finally, there is what is haram, which is what we must not do. Right? So everything that we do or say, it falls into these 5 categories. And since patience or sabr is something that is an act of worship, we use this patience to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it falls into these 5 categories as well. So the first type he mentions is the obligatory patience. And this is the patience in abstaining from the forbidden haram things and actions. So this is a type of sabr that we must do. You have to stay away from the forbidden. Also, patience or steadfastness in carrying out obligatory deeds. So the things that we need to do that are obligatory upon us as Muslims, we have to have sabr in doing that we stay doing that no matter what the situation is. What are some obligatory deeds of ours? Salah, of course. What else? Hajj, fasting. What else? Zakah, yes. So all of these things are obligations upon us. And some things may come as obligations that are communal obligations, that somebody has to do it. And sometimes it may be fardul ayn, that it's an individual obligation. But it may differ depending on the situation. But when we find those types of things, we need to have sabr on doing them. And then also he mentions sabr in facing adversity which is beyond one's control. So we talked last week about the type of adversity that there is. You can choose to be patient, and then there's the patient where you don't have any type of choice involved with that. And he mentions just like illness, poverty, etc. Something happens to you from the qadr, then you are patient upon it to the best of your ability because you have no control over that. So as far as the mustahab patience, the patience that the sabr that we should do, that we should have. He said patience in abstaining from makruh things. So if you are steadfast, you know that something is disliked, even though it may be permissible, and you have sabr, you stay upon that, you stay away from the disliked, then this is something that is praiseworthy, it's encouraged. Why do you think it would be a good thing to stay away from something that is disliked, even though it's permissible? White Kufi.
Because it's disliked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Disliked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Would you like to add something? It's probably something bad. Well, it's because it's closer to haram. Right? If I stay away from the disliked things, then I'm for sure going to stay away from the haram things. Right? And so this is the kind of thing that helps us in staying there. And this is why it's preferred that we do that. Like as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us, don't come near to zina. Right? If I don't come near to zina, then I can't commit the zina. right? So I stay in that realms of where I'm safe. He also mentioned patience in performing acts of worship that are liked or encouraged. So these things that are not obligatory deeds, but they are acts of worship like the nawafil, right? What are some of the nawafil deeds that we can do that are preferred? Anyone? Nawafil fasting, right? Fasting perhaps on Mondays and Thursdays or the white days. Yes, anyone else? The night prayer, Qayyam al-Layl, standing up at night. Even if you do it right after Isha, maybe you're that type of person that you'd rather do it in the early part of the night instead of getting up later. But either way, it's something that's good. Yes. Tahiyatul Masjid, yes. And other types of nawafil salawat, right? So if you want to pray Salat al-Tawbah, or if you want to pray the 2 rakat for making wudu, or things like that, this is the preferred type of sabr that you stick to doing those types of things. And he also said patience in refraining from taking revenge. Refraining from taking revenge. So let's say someone does something wrong to you. Are you allowed to take revenge? Yes, yes. And in some cases, that's the default. The default is that you are of those people who, when someone wrongs you, you wrong them back in a way that's permissible and allowed, right? But here we say that it is mustahab. It is preferred that you forgive. It is preferred that you refrain from taking revenge. That you could take revenge. You could give them exactly what they gave you, but it's preferred that you don't do that. Right? And so these are some of what is encouraged patience. And so instead of going to mubah, the sheikh, he went to the haram. What is the haram type of patience? What do you guys think is a haram type of patience? We usually think of patience in a way that's good, right? So what would be a haram type of patience? Yes. Mourning loudly, yeah, because it's something that is forbidden. When someone dies and we go to their janazah and we're going to bury them, we're not supposed to wail and moan and do those types of things. But let's see what he says. He says, patience in abstaining from food and drink until death. Right? Patience, sabr. You're steadfast, you're saying, I'm not going to eat until I die. And you see some people do this with hunger strikes, right? They say, I'm not going to eat until I die, and they never come away from that. Or there may be someone who is going through some severe form of depression, and they don't want to eat, they can't eat. Having this type of sabr is haram, to not eat until you die. He said also abstaining from eating haram meat like pork or carrion or blood when the alternative is death and starvation. So this is a principle which is called darura, right? Necessity. If we're in a situation to where the only thing that we can eat is pork or some type of dead meat like roadkill or blood or alcohol, right? If we're in those types of situations, in this life or death situation, we have to choose life, right? And that means we even have to eat those types of things. And some people were subjected to those type of situations. This is why a lot of times when we see conflicts in the world and the Muslims are being oppressed or this type of war zone, sometimes you will see them asking permission. They're asking permission from the scholars or asking for a fatwa allowing them to eat cats or to eat dogs or things like that, even though it's haram. Or there was a sahabi known as Abdullah ibn Hudhafa radiallahu anhu, and he was captured by the Christians, and he was put in a situation to where they only gave him pork and wine to eat. They only gave him pork and wine. They said, you want to eat? That's what you're going to eat. And he didn't eat it until, because for him, he was in a position, he was trying to work his plot against the people who had captured him. And eventually, he got himself and all of the Muslim prisoners of war released. But he told them when they said, he said, you put me in a room with wine and swine. He was like, it's permissible for me to eat it because of darura. But he said, I wouldn't give you something that you can ridicule this deen of al-Islam for me doing that. Right? But for most of us, if we are in that situation, right, and we're faced with life or death, then we have to eat those things even though they are haram, because at that point in time, they are halal. He also said patience in refraining from begging. And he also mentions there is a dispute, there's a difference of opinion as to whether begging from people is haram or halal. Right? And so because he put it in this type of situation, this category, this means that Imam Ibn Qayyim, he believed that it was haram for you to not beg until you die. Right? So some of the scholars, he mentioned that Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, was one of those who had the opinion that if a person is poor and he is about to die, if he doesn't get any food, if he doesn't do that, then it is permissible for him to beg. Not only permissible, that he must beg, right? That he must beg. But he also mentioned that Imam Ahmed, rahimahullah ta'ala, had the opinion that, no, he said that person's not going to die if he doesn't beg. He doesn't have to beg. He said because Allah will eventually give him something. Right? And so that was his opinion. So there is a difference of opinion of the scholars. But like he said, patience in refraining from begging. So in most cases, and amongst most of the scholars outside of Imam Ahmed, he mentioned that it is not permissible for a person to not beg if they need it. They should beg when they are in need. Right? And this also includes things like a GoFundMe page. If you absolutely need it, you can put that thing up. But again, there's a difference of opinion among begging, and at the very least, this is something that is makruh normally, right? So again, there's a difference of opinion amongst the scholars. So he also said sabr in enduring things that may lead to death, such as predators, snakes, fire, and water. So you put yourself in a position that could lead to your death, and you constantly endure those things. This is something that is not permissible. If you subject yourself, let's say the guy in the circus, they used to open the lion's head and open the lion's mouth and put their head in the mouth, right? Someday that sweat is going to fall on the lion's tongue and he's going to want to taste you. Or the guy that, the crocodile hunter, right? You mess around with dangerous things. And there's also there's a denomination of Christians known as the Pentecostals. And the Pentecostals, they, many of them, they feel that it is part of worship to drink snake venom that they know is poisonous, right? Because they say if they survive, this is a proof of their iman, right? Or some of them will let snakes bite them, right? So subjecting yourself to these things, walking into a fire or things like that, these things are not permissible. It's not permissible for you to have sabr on that. With respect to things like water, there was a long time ago, there was an escape artist known as Harry Houdini, right? And he used to chain himself up and have himself locked in a safe and have that safe dropped into a tub of water so that he could try to escape. And as you can probably figure out how he passed away. Right? He died doing these things. And so this is something that you should not subject yourself to. And this is that haram type of sabr. And he also says sabr at times of fitna when the Muslims are fighting the Muslims. So unfortunately, the Muslims throughout our history, they have fought other Muslims. We have had civil wars where both sides were upon Islam. He says, sabr in abstaining from fighting at such a time when the Muslims are killing Muslims is permissible, and then he says, indeed, it is mustahab. It is not only permissible, it's something that it is liked for you to refrain from doing that. And he mentioned that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that when there comes that time when the Muslims are fighting the Muslims, he said, be like the son of Adam. Which son are we talking about? Habil, right? That be like the son of Adam, the one that was killed and not the one who did the killing. Right? And so this is why it is preferred for at that particular time, and may Allah Ta'ala save the Muslims from that. Ameen. All right, so then he moves on to what is makruh, what is disliked. And that is sabr in abstaining from physical appetites, food, drinks, and relations with your wife, to the extent of causing damage to one's health. So it was haram to do it when it comes to death. But if you are doing something, if you're leaving off food, like maybe you're on a diet, right? You're leaving off drink, you're leaving off relations with your spouse, to the extent that it causes damage to your health, right? So we're not even allowed, and it's disliked that even if you're fasting, right? Because these are the things that we leave off when we fast, right? These three things: food, drink, and relations with our spouses. You do that to the extent that it damages your health, this is makruh. This is disliked for you to do it. He also said, patience in doing a makruh deed. You are doing it is makruh for you to keep doing something that is disliked. If you say, I know that it's disliked, but I'm going to stay near it. It's not haram, but you're coming closer to haram because you're doing something that is preferred that you not do. Right? And then lastly, he said, from what is mubah patience, is abstaining from mubah deeds. And so mubah are things that you don't really get a reward for it, but you're also not getting a sin. It's not preferred, it's not disliked, it's just kind of in the middle. Well, actually it's in the middle, right? What is something that we might consider makruh or mubah? Walking. Just walking. You go and take a walk, right? And it's mubah if you decide, I'm not going to take that walk today, right? What else? Sleeping. Yeah. I like to sleep. Right? Alhamdulillah. But if I decide I need to stay awake, maybe I don't need to take a nap at that time, then this is something that is mubah, right? It's allowed for you to do. You don't, there's no harm, no foul, basically. All right, so then the Shaykh, he went on to talk about good patience and bad patience. So we've talked about all of these categories that patience may fall into, but he also talked about specifically good and bad patience. So he said bad patience means having patience in keeping away from Allah and His love and His will, because this prevents a person from fulfilling his potential of attaining perfection and doing what he was created for. This is the worst type of patience, he says, and the most difficult, because there is no type of patience stronger than that of the person who willfully keeps away from his Creator, as apart from Him there is no life at all. No one is as careless as the person who has no interest in what Allah has prepared for His awliya, in the hereafter, that which no eye has ever seen, no ear has ever heard, and has never been imagined by any person. So the bad type of patience is that stubbornness, right, that a person has. They have no interest in the deen at all, right? And he said this is bad patience because they are steadfast on that. They stay away from Allah. This is the worst type of patience that can ever be. Why? Because you're not fulfilling the purpose of your creation. You're not seeking the reward that Allah Ta'ala is going to give you in the hereafter if you get close to Him. And it sounds strange to us, but I'm sure that you can think of someone who is just stubborn on the haram. We would call them hard-headed, right? Some of the people are hard-headed. There's nothing, you can go and give them every proof and they will never pray. You can go and give them every proof and they will still maybe do alcohol or drugs, right? So there are sometimes, unfortunately, there are people that practice this bad type of patience. And again, we ask Allah Ta'ala to save us from those. But he said good patience, he said it consists of two things. Patience for the sake of Allah and patience by the help of Allah. So again, good patience is patience for the sake of Allah, meaning that you intend, you're doing it consciously, willingly, you are trying to be patient. And then he said patience by the help of Allah. And then he says it is impossible to have patience for the sake of Allah without patience by the help of Allah, right? That if Allah doesn't give you patience, you won't have it no matter how much you intend it, right? So we want to have this type of good patience because anybody can, anyone who gets patience at all, whether they intended it or not, they have only received that patience by the help of Allah. But again, we want to add that good element to our character and do it intentionally and have patience for the sake of Allah. Right? All right, in the last section, he talks about the patience of the noble people and the people who are dishonorable. So he says every person has to exercise patience in order to face difficulties, right? No one is ever, if you ever want to face a difficulty, your patience is necessary. It's a necessary part of it. He said whether he does so willingly or unwillingly. So the noble person exercises patience willingly because he realizes the benefits of patience and he knows that he will be rewarded for his patience and will be criticized if he panics. He is aware that if he does not have patience, panicking and impatience will not help him to regain missed opportunities and will not take away the things that he dislikes. So again, this person who is a noble person, they recognize, remember we said that part of patience is your intellect as well as your deen. So they're making sense of it as well. They're saying that I'm going to be rewarded for this patience. This is the deen part. They face this willingly, and they know that they're going to be rewarded at the end of it, and they know that they'll be criticized if he wasn't patient. If I'm not patient at the end of this, how's that going to look? Right? Maybe the creation, but even more so the Creator. How will He look at me if I panicked at this time? And then from the part of his intellect, he sees that if I panic and I'm impatient, it's not going to help me. It's not going to change the situation. It's not going to bring back the missed opportunities. It's not going to take away the things that I dislike. Right? If I'm punching the wall because I walked outside of my car, all my tires were flat, or maybe my car was stolen, right? And I'm punching the wall, right? Or yelling at everybody. Is that going to help bring my car back? No. Is it going to take anything away from me about how I feel. No, it's not going to. And so this is, again, what the noble person does. They realize this. He says, whatever is decreed and is qada wal qadr cannot be prevented from happening. Whatever is decreed not to happen cannot be made to happen. So an attitude of impatience and panic actually causes harm. So for me to flip out, right? For me to panic and lose my stuff, right? For me to punch walls, for me to do harmful things to myself and to others, to me to complain and vent and rant, you know, it actually does more harm to me than it does good, right? And so then he brings a very impactful statement. He says, a wise man once said, a man with wisdom, as soon as adversity appears, does that which a foolish man does after a month. Right? Meaning he has patience. So a man with wisdom, a man, this noble man, this man who understands things, he does when the adversity strikes, at that moment when it happens, what a foolish person does after a month. Because after a month later, that person finally, after he's kicked and punched and yelled and screamed and does all those things, he's finally like, I have to have patience. Right? But the noble person, they're like, once it happens, I have to be patient. Right? So he said, the dishonorable man exercises patience only when he realizes he has no choice. It says, after wasting a lot of time and energy and panicking and struggling, he realizes that his impatience will not help him. Then he exercises patience in the same way that a person who has been tied up to be whipped exercises patience. So this person has been tied up, waiting to be whipped. He can do nothing about it. He said, this is the type of patience of the dishonorable person. Right? So once again, so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those people who have that good patience, and make us of those people who have the wisdom to have this honorable patience, and save us from the bad patience and the patience of the ignoble people. Ameen. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إن الله الغفور الرحيم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Khair, Brother Shaheed. Jazakallah khairan for the reminders and for your explanation. Jazakallah khair. We'll have dinner shortly here. Before that, I wanted to do a short announcement. It's more like a reminder that the community of DMCC that we have over here thrives on the hands of all the people who are a part of it. So do your part, do your best to support DMCC. We'll have, we already had an announcement sent in the main DMCC WhatsApp group regarding that. If you have not received it or you're not part of it, reach out to some of the brothers that you know from the masjid, and they should be able to help you out. I think, and also for the Friday family night, we have a separate kind of sign-up thing that all the community members are actively trying to participate. So if you are not aware of it, try to reach out to one of the brothers that you know from the masjid, and they should be able to help you in how you can contribute to make this wonderful night happen by the permission of Allah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. So let's go to dinner.